The dust hadn't settled on Margaret Preston's grave when Porter Preston realized he had no idea how to braid his daughter's hair. It was June of 1878, and the Arizona Territory's sun beat down mercilessly on the small ranch outside Pinon, New Mexico, where Porter stood at the kitchen window, watching his 3 children play in the yard as if their entire world hadn't just shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. 8-year-old Sarah had tangled blonde hair that caught on every mesquite branch. 6-year-old Thomas kept falling and scraping his knees without his mother there to clean the wounds properly. And 4-year-old Emma cried every night for the woman who would never come back. Porter was 32 years old, a capable rancher who could break a wild horse, mend fence lines that stretched for miles, and shoot a rattlesnake at 20 paces. But he could not figure out how to cook a proper meal or soothe a little girl's nightmares. The fever had taken Margaret in less than a week. One day she was laughing while hanging laundry on the line, her dark hair blowing in the hot wind, and the next she was burning up with a temperature no cold compress could bring down. The doctor from town had shaken his head gravely, muttering about scarlet fever making its rounds through the territory, and then Margaret was gone. Porter had stood beside her grave with his 3 children clinging to his legs, and he had felt something inside him close up like a fist. He would provide for his children, protect them, raise them to be strong, but that soft part of him that knew how to love freely had been buried alongside his wife. 6 months passed in a blur of burnt meals, mismatched clothing, and children who gradually learned not to ask when Mama was coming home. Porter hired a woman from town to come twice a week to help with the washing and cleaning, but Mrs. Henderson was 70 years old and could barely make the journey anymore. The house that had once smelled of fresh bread and Margaret's lavender soap now smelled of dust and loneliness. Porter did his best, he truly did, but he could see the sadness in Sarah's eyes when she looked at her brothers, trying to mother them the way an 8-year-old shouldn't have to. He could hear Thomas crying quietly at night when he thought no one was listening. And Emma, sweet little Emma, had stopped talking almost entirely. It was a cold December morning when Theodora Kane knocked on his door, and Porter Preston's carefully controlled world tilted on its axis. He had been trying to fix breakfast, burning eggs again while Sarah attempted to get Emma dressed, and Thomas searched for his other boot. The knock came firm and purposeful, and Porter wiped his hands on a dish rag before opening the door, expecting perhaps the ranch hand who was supposed to arrive that week, or maybe the new school teacher he had heard was coming to Pinon. Instead, he found himself looking at a woman with copper-colored hair pulled back in a practical bun, green eyes that held both determination and desperation, and a worn carpetbag clutched in her gloved hands. She was dressed in a simple gray traveling dress that had seen better days, and she was shivering in the morning cold. "Mr. Preston," she asked, her voice steady despite the trembling of her shoulders. "That's right," Porter said cautiously. "Can I help you?" "I certainly hope so," she replied. "My name is Theodora Kane. I have come from Santa Fe on the recommendation of Mrs. Henderson. She wrote to me and said you might be in need of a housekeeper." Porter blinked in surprise. Mrs. Henderson had mentioned something about knowing a young woman looking for work, but he had not expected anyone to actually make the journey. "Mrs. Henderson wrote to you?" "Yes, sir. I was working at a boarding house there, but the owner passed away and his son sold the property. I found myself in need of employment and a place to stay, and Mrs. Henderson, who is my late mother's cousin, suggested I might be of service to you and your children." Theodora's teeth were starting to chatter, and Porter suddenly realized he was keeping her standing in the freezing wind. "Come in, please," he said quickly, stepping aside. "Forgive me, where are my manners?" Theodora Kane stepped into the house and Porter saw her take in the chaos of his kitchen. Burnt eggs smoking in a pan, dishes piled in the wash basin, children's clothing draped over chairs, and the general disorder of a household without a woman's touch. He felt a flush of embarrassment creep up his neck. "I apologize for the state of things," he began, but Theodora was already setting down her bag and removing her gloves. "Mr. Preston, if your house was in perfect order, you would not need a housekeeper," she said simply. "Now, let me see about finishing that breakfast before the children starve. We can discuss terms of employment over a proper meal." Before Porter could respond, she had moved to the stove, removed the burnt eggs, and was examining his pantry with a critical eye. "You have flour, good. Eggs, obviously. Bacon and some dried beans. I can work with this." Porter stood in his own kitchen feeling utterly useless as this stranger took over with an efficiency that left him slightly dazed. Sarah appeared in the doorway, holding Emma's hand with Thomas peering around her shoulder. "Papa, who is that?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide. "This is Miss Kane," Porter said, finding his voice. "She may be staying to help us for a while." "Mrs. Kane, actually," Theodora corrected gently as she began cracking eggs into a bowl. "I am a widow." The word hung in the air between them, and Porter felt something shift in his understanding. She was not some young girl looking for adventure, but a woman who had already known loss. He found himself studying her more carefully. She was perhaps 26 or 27, with fine lines at the corners of her eyes that spoke of laughter or sorrow, possibly both. Her hands were capable and moved with practiced ease, but he noticed the way her wedding ring had worn a pale mark on her finger even though the ring itself was gone. "I am sorry for your loss," Porter said quietly, aware of the children listening. "And I for yours," Theodora replied, not looking up from her work. "Mrs. Henderson told me about your wife. It has been 6 months, she said." "Yes. My husband passed 2 years ago, pneumonia." She said it matter-of-factly, but Porter heard the slight catch in her voice. "These things are sent to test us, I suppose. Now then, children, would you like to help me set the table?" Sarah moved forward slowly, still cautious, but Theodora's warm smile seemed to ease her worry. Within minutes, the kitchen was transformed. Theodora had the children setting out plates and cups. She had cooked a proper breakfast of scrambled eggs, bacon, and fresh biscuits that she somehow managed to produce from his meager supplies, and the house smelled like a home again. They sat down to eat together, and Porter watched his children's faces as they tasted real food for the first time in months. Thomas ate 3 biscuits, Sarah actually smiled, and Emma, silent little Emma, whispered a tiny thank you that made Theodora's eyes shine with moisture. "You have lovely manners," Theodora told Emma gently. "And what a pretty dress you are wearing." It was on backwards and missing 2 buttons, but Emma beamed at the compliment. After breakfast, Theodora cleared the dishes and turned to Porter. "Shall we discuss the arrangements, Mr. Preston?" They stepped out onto the porch while the children played inside. The winter sun was climbing higher, burning off the morning frost, and Porter could see his ranch stretching out before him, the land he and Margaret had built together. "I can offer you room and board," Porter began awkwardly. "There is a small room off the kitchen that Mrs. Henderson used when she stayed over. It is not much, but it is warm and private. As for wages, I can pay $15 a month, plus your meals and any supplies you need." "That seems fair," Theodora said. "My duties would include cooking, cleaning, laundry, and helping care for the children." "Yes, Sarah tries her best, but she is only 8. She should be allowed to be a child, not raising her brothers." Porter's voice was rough with guilt. Theodora looked at him then, really looked at him, and Porter felt exposed under her steady gaze. "Mr. Preston, you have done what you could. Your children are fed, clothed, and loved. Many men would have sent them away to relatives or orphanages. You kept them together. That counts for something. The kindness in her words was almost harder to bear than criticism would have been. Porter cleared his throat. When could you start? I already have, Theodora said with a slight smile. That is, if you will have me. I would be grateful for the help, Porter admitted. More grateful than you know. And so Theodora Kane moved into the Preston household, bringing with her a single carpetbag of belongings and a capability that transformed their lives within days. She rose before dawn to start coffee and breakfast. She taught Sarah how to properly braid her own hair. She cleaned and bandaged Thomas's scraped knees with gentle efficiency. And she sang soft songs to Emma at bedtime until the little girl's voice began to return. Porter found himself watching her when he thought she would not notice. The way she hummed while kneading bread dough, the patience she showed when teaching Thomas his letters, the sad smile that crossed her face sometimes when she thought no one was looking. He was careful not to let his observation turn into anything more. Theodora was his employee, nothing more. She deserved respect and proper distance. But it was hard to maintain that distance when she brought him hot coffee while he worked in the barn, when she laughed at Thomas's silly jokes, when she sat with Emma for hours teaching her to sew simple stitches. It was hard not to notice how the house felt alive again, how his children bloomed under her care, how the emptiness that had consumed him for 6 months seemed just a little less vast. Christmas came, and Theodora spent her first wages on fabric to make new dresses for Sarah and Emma, and shirts for Thomas. She baked cookies and pies and decorated the house with pine branches and red ribbons. On Christmas morning, Porter came downstairs to find his children laughing around the kitchen table while Theodora served them hot cocoa, and he had to step back outside for a moment to compose himself. "Are you all right?" Theodora asked when she found him on the porch a few minutes later. "I am fine," Porter said, not meeting her eyes. "It is just that this is the first time I have heard them laugh like that since Margaret died." Theodora was quiet for a moment. "It does not dishonor her memory for them to be happy again, Mr. Preston. I am certain she would want that for them." "I know," Porter said, "and I am grateful to you for giving them that gift. They are wonderful children. It is easy to care for them." She hesitated, then added, "You have done well with them. You should be proud." Porter finally looked at her, and in the clear winter sunlight he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes, the dusting of freckles across her nose that her bonnet usually hid. "I could not have managed much longer without help. You saved us, Mrs. Kane." "Theodora," she said quietly. "When it is just us, you may call me Theodora. Then you should call me Porter." They stood there on the porch, the sounds of the children's laughter drifting through the door, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, perhaps. A recognition of shared grief and the tentative hope that life might eventually hold joy again. The winter passed slowly, as winters do in New Mexico. The days were short and the nights were cold, but the Preston house was warm and full of life. Theodora proved to be not just a capable housekeeper, but a natural teacher and storyteller. She taught the children their lessons during the long winter evenings, reading to them from the few books Porter owned and making up stories when they ran out. She taught Sarah how to cook simple meals, Thomas how to help with chores without complaint, and Emma how to find her voice again. Porter watched his oldest daughter transform from a worried little adult back into a child. He saw Thomas's confidence grow as Theodora praised his reading and arithmetic. And he wept quietly in the barn one afternoon when Emma ran to him shouting, "Papa, Papa, look what I made," holding up a crooked stitched sampler with her name on it. For his part, Porter found himself working harder than ever to provide for his expanded household. He took on extra work when he could, hiring out his skills to neighboring ranches, always making sure to bring home small gifts for the children. A peppermint stick from the general store, a hair ribbon, a small wooden horse he had carved. And he brought things for Theodora too, though he told himself it was just proper appreciation for her work. A new apron when hers became worn, a book of poetry he noticed her eyeing in town, a warm shawl for the cold evenings. Theodora accepted these gifts with grace and a slight blush that Porter found far too appealing. He reminded himself firmly that she was his employee, that she had come to his home for work and safety, not to be courted by a grief-stricken widower. He kept his distance, was always proper and respectful, and tried very hard not to notice how his heart lifted when he heard her singing in the kitchen, or how complete his house felt with her in it. But late at night, lying alone in his bed, Porter could not help but remember what it was like to share his life with someone, to have a partner to discuss the day with, to share worries and hopes, to simply not be alone. He felt guilty for these thoughts, as if he was betraying Margaret's memory by even considering the possibility of caring for someone else. So he pushed the feelings down and focused on being a good employer and father. Theodora, for her part, was fighting her own battles. She had come to the Preston ranch out of desperation and need, but she had not expected to find such a good man or such wonderful children. She had not expected to feel her broken heart begin to heal as she watched Porter patiently teach Thomas to ride, or saw him listen seriously to Sarah's concerns about her schoolwork. She had not expected to lie awake at night thinking about the rare times Porter smiled, or the strength in his hands when he carried firewood, or the gentle way he spoke to his children. She had loved her husband, Daniel, with the passionate certainty of youth. He had been 24 and she 21 when they married, and he had died less than 3 years later, leaving her alone and adrift. The grief had been consuming, and she had spent 2 years simply surviving, taking whatever work she could find, moving from place to place. She had thought her heart was permanently closed, that she would never want to risk that kind of pain again. But Porter Preston was different. He was older than Daniel had been, more settled and serious. He carried his own grief like a heavy coat, and she recognized in him the same careful distance she maintained. They were two people who had loved and lost, and perhaps that understanding was what made her feel safe enough to begin feeling again. Spring came early that year, arriving in March with sudden warmth and the smell of desert flowers blooming. The children spent more time outside, and Theodora found herself working in the kitchen garden, planting vegetables and herbs. Porter expanded the chicken coop and bought 2 milk cows, saying the children needed fresh milk. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. It was on a warm April afternoon when everything changed. Porter was working on the fence line behind the barn when he heard Sarah scream. He dropped his tools and ran, his heart in his throat, terrified that something had happened to one of his children. He rounded the corner of the house to find Sarah pointing at the well, her face white with terror. "Emma fell in," she cried. "She leaned over too far and she fell." Porter ran to the well and looked down into the darkness. He could hear splashing and crying echoing up from below. The well was 30 feet deep with about 10 feet of water at the bottom. Emma was down there in the cold, dark water and she could not swim. "Hold on, baby," Porter shouted down. "Papa is coming." Theodora appeared at his side, her face pale but calm. "Can you fit down there?" Porter looked at the narrow opening of the well. He was a large man, broad-shouldered from years of ranch work. "I will get stuck," he said, his voice breaking with panic. "I am too big." Without hesitation, Theodora began removing her boots. "Then I will go." You cannot be serious, Porter said, but she was already tying up her skirts. I am small enough to fit and I can swim. My father taught me when I was young. She looked at him steadily. We do not have time to argue. She was right. Porter could hear Emma's cries becoming weaker. He grabbed the rope they used to draw water and secured it around Theodora's waist. I will lower you down. When you have her, I will pull you both up. Theodora nodded and climbed over the edge of the well. Porter lowered her carefully, the rope burning his hands as he paid it out foot by foot. He could hear Theodora speaking calmly to Emma, reassuring her, and then there was a splash as Theodora reached the water. I have her, Theodora called up. Pull us up. Porter hauled on the rope with all his strength, the muscles in his back and arms screaming with effort. Sarah and Thomas had joined him, their small hands grasping the rope to help. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the rope came up. Porter could see them now. Theodora holding Emma above the water with one arm while she gripped the rope with the other. He reached down and pulled Emma out first, wrapping her in his coat while she sobbed against his chest. Then he reached for Theodora, grasping her arms and hauling her out of the well. She collapsed onto the ground, soaking wet and shivering, her hair hanging in tangles around her face. Thank you, Porter said, and his voice was shaking. Thank you, Theodora. You saved her life. Theodora looked up at him, water dripping from her eyelashes, and smiled. She is safe. That is all that matters. Porter helped her to her feet, and suddenly they were standing very close, his hands on her arms, her green eyes looking up into his. For a moment, the rest of the world fell away. There was just the two of them, breathing hard, alive, and something powerful passed between them that could not be denied or ignored. Sarah's voice broke the moment. We should get them inside where it is warm. The practical comment brought them back to reality. Porter scooped Emma into his arms and Theodora walked beside him, dripping water with every step, as they all hurried into the house. Porter started a fire in the fireplace, while Theodora changed Emma into dry clothes and wrapped her in blankets. The little girl was cold and frightened but unharmed. You stay here with your brothers and sister, Porter told Sarah, handing her a cup of warm broth to give to Emma. Make sure she drinks this. Then he turned to Theodora, who was still standing in her soaking wet dress, trying to stop shivering. You need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death. Come on. He led her to her small room and grabbed towels from the linen press. I will give you privacy to change. Call if you need anything. Porter, Theodora said, her teeth chattering. I am so cold. He could see her lips were turning blue. Change quickly. I will make hot coffee. By the time Theodora emerged in dry clothes with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, Porter had hot coffee and leftover stew warming on the stove. He pressed a cup into her hands and made her sit by the fire. You could have died, he said quietly, staring into the flames. That well is deep and the water is ice cold. You could have gotten trapped down there or drowned trying to save her. But I did not, Theodora replied, and Emma is safe. You risked your life for my daughter. Porter's voice was rough with emotion. I will never be able to repay you for that. I do not want repayment, Theodora said. I did what anyone would do. No, Porter said, turning to look at her. Most people would not have climbed into that well without a second thought. Most people would have hesitated or been too afraid. You did not even pause. Theodora met his eyes over the rim of her coffee cup. I care for them, she said simply. I care for Sarah and Thomas and Emma as if they were my own children. I could not let her drown. The honesty in her words struck Porter like a physical blow. Here was a woman who had come to them as a stranger 6 months ago, desperate for work, and she had given them everything. Her time, her energy, her care, and now nearly her life. She had filled his empty house not just with her presence but with love, and he suddenly realized with perfect clarity that he was in love with her. The realization terrified him. It felt too soon, too much, a betrayal of everything he had promised Margaret. But looking at Theodora sitting by his fire, wrapped in blankets and sipping coffee after saving his daughter's life, Porter could not deny the truth any longer. "Theodora," he began, but she held up a hand. "Please do not," she said softly. "I know what you are going to say, and I am not sure I am ready to hear it." "What do you think I was going to say?" Porter asked, his heart pounding. She looked away, a blush coloring her cheeks. "I think you were going to say something that would change everything between us." "And I am frightened of that change, Porter. I am frightened of caring too much and losing everything again." Porter moved to kneel in front of her chair, taking her cold hands in his. "I am frightened too," he admitted. "I have spent 6 months trying not to feel anything because the pain of losing Margaret almost destroyed me. I told myself that all I needed was to take care of my children and work the ranch, that nothing else mattered. But then you knocked on my door, and everything changed. You brought light back into this house, Theodora. You brought joy and laughter and life, and I find myself wanting things I thought I would never want again." Theodora's eyes filled with tears. "I did not come here looking for this," she whispered. "I came here to work, to have a safe place to rebuild my life. But every day I am here, I find myself caring more. For the children, for this house, for you. And it terrifies me because I know how much it hurts to lose someone you love." "Then we are both terrified together," Porter said, squeezing her hands gently. "But I am beginning to think that being terrified is better than being numb. These past 6 months with you here, I have felt alive again. Is that worth the risk?" "I do not know," Theodora said honestly. "I truly do not know." Porter released her hands and stood up, giving her space. "Then we do not have to decide anything right now, but I wanted you to know that I care for you, Theodora, not just as my housekeeper or as someone good with my children, but as a woman I greatly admire and respect. Whatever happens from here, I needed you to know that." Theodora looked up at him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you for being honest with me. I need time to think." "Take all the time you need," Porter said gently. "I am not going anywhere." The next few weeks were both wonderful and awkward. Theodora continued with her duties, caring for the children and managing the house, but there was a new awareness between her and Porter. They were careful not to stand too close, not to let their hands brush when passing dishes at dinner, not to let their eyes linger too long. But the tension was there, humming beneath every interaction. The children noticed, of course. Sarah watched them with knowing eyes that seemed far too old for 8 years. Thomas asked Porter point-blank if Miss Kane was going to be their new mama, which made Porter choke on his coffee. And Emma started calling Theodora Mama Thea when she thought the adults could not hear, which made Theodora's eyes shine with tears every time. It was Sarah who finally forced the issue. She came to Porter one evening while he was doing the evening chores in the barn, her young face serious and determined. "Papa, I need to talk to you about something important," she said, climbing up to sit on a hay bale. "What is it, sweetheart?" Porter asked, pausing in his work. "Are you in love with Miss Kane?" Porter nearly dropped the saddle he was holding. "Sarah, that is not an appropriate question." "Why not? I am not a baby, Papa. I see the way you look at her and the way she looks at you when she thinks no one is watching. And I think it would be good if you loved her." Porter sat down beside his daughter, marveling at her perceptiveness. "It is complicated, Sarah." "Why is it complicated? You like her, she likes you, and she makes us all happy. Mama would want you to be happy, Papa. She told me so." "What do you mean?" Porter asked, his throat tight. "Before she died, when the fever was really bad, Mama asked me to come sit with her. She told me that if anything happened to her, I should help take care of you and the boys. And she said that you might be sad for a long time, but that it would be okay for you to be happy again someday. She said she wanted you to find someone to love, because you have such a big heart and it should not be empty forever. Porter felt tears burning in his eyes. She said that? Yes. And I think Miss Kane is nice and she loves us, and she makes you smile again. So I think you should marry her, Papa, if she will have you. It is not that simple, sweetheart. Miss Kane has to want that too, and she may not. She lost her husband just like I lost your mama. She might not be ready to take that risk again. Sarah hopped down from the hay bale and looked up at her father with startling maturity. Then you should tell her that we need her, not just to cook and clean, but because she is part of our family now. Tell her that it is scary to love someone again, but that we will all be brave together. Porter pulled his daughter into a hug, overwhelmed by her wisdom. When did you get so smart? I have always been smart, Papa. You just forget sometimes because I am little. That night after the children were in bed, Porter found Theodora sitting on the porch steps, looking up at the stars. The spring night was warm and full of the sound of crickets and distant coyotes. "May I join you?" he asked. "Of course," Theodora said, moving over to make room. They sat in silence for a few minutes, and then Porter said, "Sarah told me something interesting today." "Oh, what was that?" "She asked me if I was in love with you." Theodora drew in a sharp breath but did not look at him. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her it was complicated." "But she said something else too. She said that before Margaret died, her mother told her that it would be okay for me to find love again someday, that Margaret wanted me to be happy." "That was kind of her," Theodora said softly. "She must have loved you very much." "She did. And I loved her." "But Sarah is right about something, Theodora. These past months with you here, I have been happy again. The children have been happy. And I realized something when you climbed down that well to save Emma. I realized that life is short and unpredictable, and the people we love can be taken from us in an instant. So if we are lucky enough to find happiness, we should not be afraid to reach for it." Theodora turned to look at him then, her green eyes reflecting the starlight. "What are you saying, Porter?" "I am saying that I love you, Theodora Kane. I love the way you sing while making breakfast, the way you laugh at Thomas's jokes, the way you patiently teach Emma her letters. I love your strength and your kindness and your courage. I love that you filled my empty house not just with your presence but with light and life. And I know it is fast, and I know we are both scared, but I also know that I do not want to spend another day pretending I do not feel this way." Theodora's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have been trying so hard not to, telling myself it was too soon, that I should not risk my heart again. But I cannot help it, Porter. I love you and I love your children, and the thought of leaving here, of going back to being alone, breaks my heart." Porter reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Then do not leave. Stay with us, not as our housekeeper but as my wife, as a mother to Sarah and Thomas and Emma. Stay and let us build a life together." "Are you proposing to me?" Theodora asked, half laughing, half crying. "I suppose I am," Porter said, smiling. "Though I am making a mess of it, I do not even have a ring to offer you." "I do not need a ring," Theodora said. "I just need to know that this is real, that you truly want me, not just someone to help with the children and the house." Porter cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "This is real, Theodora. I want you, all of you. Your laughter and your tears, your strength and your fears, your past and your future. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to raise these children together and maybe have more if God blesses us. I want to grow old with you and watch our grandchildren play in this yard someday. I want all of it, if you will have me." Theodora's answer was to lean forward and kiss him, her lips soft and warm against his. Porter wrapped his arms around her and held her close, and for the first time in 6 months, he felt truly whole. They sat there on the porch steps, holding each other under the stars, two broken people who had found a way to heal together. When they finally pulled apart, Theodora was smiling through her tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Porter Preston. I will be your wife and a mother to your children, and we will be brave together." Porter laughed, a sound of pure joy that rang out into the night. "When? How soon can we do this?" "Well, we should probably tell the children first," Theodora said practically, though her eyes were dancing with happiness. "And then I suppose we should speak to the minister in town. I do not need a big wedding, Porter. Just you and me and the children making promises before God." "That sounds perfect," Porter agreed. "Should we tell them tomorrow?" "I think they already know," Theodora said with a smile. "Sarah has been giving me knowing looks for weeks, and Emma called me Mama Thea yesterday when she thought I could not hear. They have just been waiting for us to figure it out." She was right. When they gathered the children the next morning to tell them the news, Sarah just smiled and said, "Finally." Thomas cheered and asked if this meant they could have cake, and Emma climbed into Theodora's lap and said, "I knew you would be my mama." They were married 3 weeks later, on a beautiful May morning in the small church in Pinyon. Sarah wore her best dress and carried wildflowers. Thomas and Emma stood beside them as witnesses along with Mrs. Henderson, who cried through the entire ceremony, and Porter held Theodora's hands and made promises he intended to keep for the rest of his life. "I, Porter Preston, take you, Theodora Kane, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice strong and clear. "I promise to love you and cherish you in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death parts us. I, Theodora Kane, take you, Porter Preston, to be my lawfully wedded husband," Theodora replied, her eyes never leaving his. "I promise to love you and cherish you, to honor you and stand beside you, through whatever joys and sorrows life brings us, until death parts us." The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and when Porter kissed his new bride, the children cheered and the small congregation applauded. They had a simple celebration at the ranch afterward, with food that Theodora and Mrs. Henderson had prepared the day before, and neighbors from surrounding ranches who had come to wish them well. That night, after the guests had left and the children were asleep, Porter and Theodora stood together in what was now their shared bedroom. The room that had been so empty and cold for 6 months was warm and welcoming again, and Theodora's things were arranged alongside his own. "Are you happy?" Porter asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind as she stood looking out the window at the moonlit ranch. "I am," Theodora said, leaning back against him. "I did not think I would ever be this happy again. When Daniel died, I thought my life was over. I thought I would just exist, getting through each day but never truly living. And then I knocked on your door and everything changed." "I felt the same way," Porter admitted. "After Margaret died, I was just going through the motions. Taking care of the children, working the ranch, but not really living. You brought me back to life, Theodora. You and your courage and your love." Theodora turned in his arms to face him. "We have both lost people we loved, and I think maybe that makes us appreciate this second chance even more. We know how precious it is, how easily it can be lost. So we will not waste a single day, Porter Preston. We will love each other and love these children and build a beautiful life together." "That sounds perfect," Porter said, and he kissed her again, deeply and thoroughly, sealing the promises they had made. The months that followed were the happiest of Porter's life. Theodora took to being his wife and the children's mother as naturally as breathing. She kept the house running smoothly, cooked meals that had the children asking for seconds, and managed to make everyone feel loved and cared for. But she was not just a wife and mother. She had opinions about the ranch and offered suggestions that often proved useful. She had a good head for numbers and took over managing the household accounts, freeing up Porter's time for the actual ranch work. Sarah blossomed under Theodora's guidance, growing from a worried little caretaker back into a cheerful girl who loved learning and playing with her brothers. Thomas became more confident, knowing he had both a father and a mother to turn to when he needed help or comfort. And Emma, sweet little Emma who had stopped talking when her mother died, now chattered constantly, following Theodora around and helping with everything she could. Summer arrived with its fierce heat, and Theodora proved herself capable of handling the demanding work of a ranch wife. She preserved fruits and vegetables from the garden, helped with the livestock, and managed to keep the house cool and comfortable even in the worst of the heat. Porter often came in from working in the blazing sun to find cold water waiting for him, and a wife who smiled at him as if he was the most important person in the world. At night, they would lie in bed talking about their days, making plans for the future, sharing memories of their past. Theodora told him about her childhood in Santa Fe, about her parents who had died of influenza when she was 17, about meeting and falling in love with Daniel. Porter told her about growing up on his father's ranch in Texas, about bringing Margaret out to New Mexico territory to start their own place, about the dreams they had shared. "You think they would have liked each other?" Theodora asked one night. "Margaret and Daniel." "I think they would have," Porter said thoughtfully. "And I think they would be happy for us, happy that we found each other and did not let grief destroy us." "I like to think so," Theodora agreed. "I used to feel so guilty, Porter, like I was betraying Daniel by having feelings for you. But then I realized that love is not a finite resource. Just because I loved him does not mean I cannot love you, and my love for you does not diminish what Daniel and I shared. They are different loves, both real, both important." "I feel the same way about Margaret," Porter said. "She will always be the mother of my children, the first woman I loved. But you are my future, Theodora. You are the woman I will grow old with, the mother my children will remember raising them. That does not erase what came before, but it does not have to." These conversations, honest and heartfelt, deepened their bond. They were not pretending that their first marriages had not happened or did not matter. They were acknowledging that their pasts were part of who they were, but choosing to build a future together anyway. In August, Theodora began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited to be sure before saying anything to Porter, visiting the doctor in town who confirmed her suspicion. She was carrying their child, due to arrive in late winter or early spring. She told Porter that evening after the children were in bed, leading him out to the porch where they had first confessed their love months earlier. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hands in hers. "That sounds ominous," Porter said, though he was smiling. "What is it?" "We are going to have a baby," Theodora said, watching his face carefully. "I saw the doctor today and he confirmed it. I am about 2 months along, which means the baby will come in March or so." For a moment, Porter just stared at her, and Theodora felt a flutter of worry. Was he not happy about this? Did he not want more children? But then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen, and he swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down. "We are having a baby," Porter said wonderingly, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "You and me, a child of our own." "Are you happy?" Theodora asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy, I am overjoyed. Theodora, this is wonderful news, a baby, our baby. I cannot believe it." "I was nervous to tell you," Theodora admitted. "I was not sure how you would feel about it." How could I be anything but thrilled? Porter asked, cupping her face in his hands. This baby is a gift, Theodora, a symbol of our love and our new life together. And Sarah and Thomas and Emma will be so excited to have a little brother or sister. He was right. When they told the children the next day, there was immediate excitement. Sarah wanted to know if she could help take care of the baby. Thomas hoped it would be a boy so he would not be outnumbered anymore. And Emma just clapped her hands and said she would teach the baby everything she knew. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall. Theodora had some morning sickness in the early months, but Porter was attentive and supportive, bringing her dry crackers in bed and taking over more of the household tasks when she was not feeling well. As her belly grew, the whole family became protective of her. Sarah insisted on doing more of the cooking. Thomas carried anything heavy, and Emma appointed herself Theodora's personal assistant. Porter found himself marveling at the changes in his wife's body, the visible proof of the new life they had created together. He would place his hand on her rounded belly and feel their child move, and he would be overwhelmed with gratitude for this second chance at happiness. Winter came again, and Theodora spent more time inside, sewing baby clothes and preparing for the new arrival. Mrs. Henderson came to visit often, offering advice and sharing stories of her own children who were now grown with families of their own. The old woman had tears in her eyes when she told Theodora how proud she was of the life she had built. When you came to me in Santa Fe, you were so lost, Mrs. Henderson said. A young widow with nothing and nowhere to go, and now look at you. A husband who adores you, 3 children who love you, and a baby on the way. You have built yourself a beautiful family, Theodora. I could not have done it without you, Theodora said, hugging her cousin. You are the one who told me about Porter and his children. You gave me this chance. I merely made the introduction, Mrs. Henderson said. You are the one who had the courage to take the risk to open your heart again. That is all you, my dear girl. As Theodora's due date approached, Porter became increasingly nervous. He remembered when Margaret had the children, but this felt different somehow. More precious, more terrifying. What if something went wrong? What if he lost Theodora the way he had lost Margaret? He tried to hide his fears, but Theodora knew him too well. Porter, look at me, she said one night in late February when she caught him pacing the bedroom floor. I am healthy and strong. The doctor says everything is progressing normally. Women have babies every day and the vast majority of them are just fine. I know, Porter said, running his hand through his hair. But I cannot help worrying. I cannot lose you, Theodora. I cannot go through that again. Theodora struggled out of bed and went to him, taking his face in her hands. You will not lose me. I promise you, I am going to be fine. This baby is going to be fine. And you are going to be right here with me when our child comes into the world. Trust me, Porter. Trust us. Her confidence calmed him and he held her close, feeling their baby moving between them. I do trust you. I am just scared. I am scared too, Theodora admitted, but we will get through it together, just like we get through everything else. Their baby chose to arrive on a mild day in early March, when the first wildflowers were beginning to bloom across the New Mexico landscape. Theodora's labor started in the morning, and Porter immediately sent Thomas riding into town to fetch the doctor and Mrs. Henderson. Sarah took charge of Emma, keeping her occupied and calm, while her father and stepmother dealt with the serious business of bringing a new life into the world. The labor was long and difficult, and Porter stayed by Theodora's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping the sweat from her brow, and telling her how strong she was and how much he loved her. When she cried out in pain, he felt each cry like a knife in his own chest, helpless to do anything but be there with her. Finally, As the sun was setting and painting the sky brilliant orange and gold, their son was born. He came into the world screaming lustily, with a shock of dark hair and his mother's green eyes. The doctor cleaned him up and placed him in Theodora's arms, and Porter looked down at his wife and their newborn son with tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Theodora whispered, exhausted but radiant. "Look what we made, Porter. Look at our son." "He is beautiful," Porter said, running a gentle finger over the baby's tiny hand, "just like his mother." They named him Peter Daniel Preston, after Porter's father and Theodora's first husband. It felt right to honor both their pasts while celebrating their future. When they brought the baby out to meet Sarah, Thomas, and Emma, the children were enchanted. "He is so small," Sarah breathed, carefully touching her baby brother's cheek. "I am not the youngest anymore," Emma said with satisfaction. "Can I hold him?" Thomas asked, and under Theodora's careful supervision, each of the children got to hold baby Peter. The days that followed were chaotic and exhausting and wonderful. Peter was a good baby for the most part, but he still needed to be fed every few hours and required constant care. Theodora was recovering from the birth and could not do everything she usually did, so everyone pitched in. Sarah helped with cooking and cleaning. Thomas took over more of the outdoor chores, and Emma appointed herself Peter's official song singer, crooning lullabies to him whenever he fussed. Porter split his time between caring for his wife and new son, taking care of the ranch work that could not be neglected, and making sure his other 3 children did not feel forgotten in the chaos. It was exhausting, but it was also deeply fulfilling. His house was full of life and love and noise, and he would not have changed a thing. As the weeks passed and Theodora regained her strength, they fell into a new rhythm as a family of 6. Peter grew and thrived, hitting all his milestones and charming everyone with his ready smiles. Sarah, now 9 years old, was an enormous help and a wonderful big sister. Thomas, at 7, was proud of his role as big brother and protector. And Emma, who had just turned 5, loved having a baby to dote on. One evening in late April, Porter found Theodora sitting in the rocking chair in their bedroom, nursing Peter while looking out the window at the sunset. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching them, overwhelmed by how much his life had changed in the 18 months since Theodora had knocked on his door. "What are you thinking about?" Theodora asked, noticing him watching. Porter came into the room and sat on the edge of the bed. "I was thinking about the first time you came here. You were shivering on my doorstep with a worn carpetbag, desperate for work and a safe place to stay. And I was drowning, trying to raise 3 children alone and failing miserably. I had no idea that opening that door would change my entire life." Theodora smiled at him, her eyes soft. "I remember that day so clearly. I was terrified that you would turn me away, that I would have to go back to Santa Fe with nothing. And then you let me in and I saw your children and this house, and I knew I was home. I did not realize it then, but I knew." "You saved us," Porter said. "All of us. You brought light back into this house, you gave my children a mother, and you gave me a reason to live again instead of just existing. And now look at us. A family, whole and happy and full of love. We saved each other," Theodora corrected gently. "You gave me a purpose, a family, a home. You gave me a reason to risk my heart again. We were both broken, Porter, and we healed each other." Peter finished nursing and Theodora handed him to Porter to burp. Porter held his son against his shoulder, patting his back gently, and felt the weight of gratitude and love almost crush him. "I love you, Theodora Preston," he said. "More than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. You are my wife, my partner, my best friend. You are the mother of my children and the keeper of my heart. And I promise you, every day for the rest of my life, I will work to deserve the gift you have given me." Theodora stood and came to him, wrapping her arms around both him and the baby. "You already deserve it, Porter. You are a good man, a wonderful father, and the best husband I could have ever hoped for. I love you too, with all my heart. And I am so grateful that I was brave enough to knock on your door that cold December morning." They stood there together, holding their son, surrounded by the sounds of their other children laughing in the next room, and Porter knew that he was the luckiest man alive. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered under Porter's management, and Theodora's careful handling of the finances. They added on to the house, giving each of the children their own room and building a proper parlor where Theodora could entertain the neighbors who increasingly became friends. They bought more cattle and expanded their operations, and Porter hired a couple of ranch hands to help with the work. Sarah grew into a lovely young woman, intelligent and capable, who eventually married the school teacher who came to Pinyon when she was 16. Thomas inherited his father's love of ranching and worked alongside Porter from a young age, eventually taking over more and more of the daily operations. Emma was the artistic one, always drawing and painting, and she eventually went away to school in Santa Fe to study art. Peter was joined by two more siblings in the years that followed. First came Margaret, named for Porter's first wife with Theodora's blessing, a sweet-tempered girl with her father's dark hair and serious eyes. 2 years after that came Daniel, named for Theodora's first husband, a mischievous boy who kept them all on their toes. The house that had been so empty and silent after Margaret Preston's death was now constantly full of noise and activity. Children playing, friends visiting, celebrations and holidays, and the everyday chaos of a large, happy family. And through it all, at the center of everything, were Porter and Theodora, partners in every sense of the word. They had their challenges, of course. There were years when the cattle prices were low and money was tight. There were illnesses and injuries, storms and droughts, and all the difficulties that come with ranching in the harsh New Mexico territory. But they faced everything together, and their love for each other only deepened with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Porter surprised Theodora with a ring. It was a simple gold band with a small emerald matching her green eyes, and he slipped it onto her finger as they stood on the porch where he had first proposed. "I should have given this to you 10 years ago when I asked you to marry me," Porter said. "But better late than never." Theodora looked at the ring through tears of joy. "It is beautiful, Porter, but you did not need to do this." "I wanted to," Porter said. "I wanted you to have something that represents what you mean to me, something you can look at and remember that you are loved." "I never forget that," Theodora said, kissing him. "Not for a single moment. You show me you love me every day in 1,000 little ways. This ring is beautiful, but your love is what truly matters." They stood together on the porch, now in their early 40s, with gray starting to show in their hair and lines of laughter and life on their faces. Behind them, their house was full of the sounds of their children, and before them stretched the land they had built a life on. It was not the life either of them had planned when they were young. Both had loved and lost, grieved and struggled. But they had found their way to each other, and in doing so had created something beautiful and lasting. "You ever regret it?" Porter asked suddenly. "Knocking on that door 10 years ago, taking a chance on a grieving widower and his 3 motherless children." Theodora looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "Regret it? Porter Preston, that was the best decision I ever made. You and these children are the greatest gift of my life." "Why would you even ask such a thing?" "I just want to make sure you are happy," Porter said, "that this life is enough for you." "Enough? Porter, this life is more than I ever dreamed possible." I have a husband who loves me, 6 children who are healthy and happy, a home that is truly mine, and enough love to fill every empty space in my heart. How could that not be enough? Porter pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. I love you, Theodora Preston. Thank you for filling my empty house. Thank you for opening the door, Theodora replied. Thank you for being brave enough to risk your heart again, for giving me and our love a chance. You did not have to do that. You could have kept me at a distance, treated me as just a housekeeper. But you let me in, Porter. You let me into your life and your heart and your family. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. They kissed there on the porch as the sun set over their ranch, 2 people who had been broken and lost but had found wholeness and purpose in each other. Their story was not one of love at first sight or fairy tale romance. It was better than that. It was a story of courage and healing, of second chances and hard-won happiness, of 2 people who refused to let grief define them. As the years continued to pass, Porter and Theodora became pillars of the Pinyon community. They were known for their generosity, often helping neighbors in need, and their home was always open to travelers needing a meal or a place to stay. Theodora became involved in starting a school fund to ensure all the children in the area could get an education, while Porter served on the town council and helped make decisions about the growing community's future. Their children grew and thrived. Sarah and her husband, Jonathan, the schoolteacher, built a house in town and had 3 children of their own, making Porter and Theodora grandparents for the first time. Thomas married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread and built a house on the far side of the Preston ranch, choosing to stay close and help run the family business. Emma shocked everyone by falling in love with a painter she met in Santa Fe. And though Porter worried about his artistic daughter marrying a man with such an uncertain profession, Theodora reminded him that love was more important than security. Peter, Margaret, and Daniel grew up in a house full of love and laughter, never knowing the emptiness and grief that had once filled those rooms. They knew the stories of their older siblings' first mother, and they knew that their own mother had been married before, but to them, these were just stories. What they knew for certain was that their parents loved each other and loved all of them, and that love was the foundation everything else was built on. One afternoon in late summer, when Porter was 55 and Theodora 52, they took a rare moment to sit together on the porch. The house was unusually quiet, with most of the children either grown and gone or out with friends. They sat in the rocking chairs they had bought years ago, holding hands and watching the sun move across the sky. Can you believe it has been 23 years since I knocked on that door? Theodora asked, a slight smile playing on her lips. 23 years, Porter repeated, shaking his head in wonder. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like you have always been here. I have been here for more than half my life now, Theodora mused. This ranch, this house, this family, it is all I know. I can barely remember the woman I was before, alone and grieving in Santa Fe. She was brave, Porter said. Brave enough to take a chance on a stranger and his children, brave enough to open her heart to love again when she had every reason to keep it closed. That woman was remarkable, and she grew into an even more remarkable one. Theodora squeezed his hand. We have had a good life, have we not? Despite all the heartache and loss we both experienced, despite all the challenges we have faced, we built something good here. We built something great, Porter corrected. Look at our children, Theodora. 6 good people who know how to work hard and love deeply. Look at our grandchildren and the ones still to come. Look at this ranch that has supported us and provided for us. Look at the community we are part of and the lives we have touched. This is a legacy, Theodora. This is what we leave behind. You are getting philosophical in your old age, Theodora teased, but her eyes were misty with emotion. Not old, just grateful, Porter said. Grateful for every day I have had with you, grateful for the family we built together, grateful that I was smart enough to open that door when you knocked. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Theodora said, "Do you still think about her? About Margaret?" "Sometimes," Porter admitted. "Not with the sharp pain it used to be, but with a gentle fondness. She gave me Sarah and Thomas and Emma. She was my partner for those early years. I will always be grateful for the time we had. But you, Theodora, you are the love of my life. You are the woman I chose and who chose me, the woman I have grown old with. Margaret will always be my first love, but you are my greatest love." "I feel the same about Daniel," Theodora said. "I was so young when I loved him, barely more than a girl. What we had was real, but it was the love of youth. What you and I have built together, this partnership and friendship and deep, abiding love, that is the love of a lifetime." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, their grown children and grandchildren began arriving for dinner. It had become a tradition over the years, these Sunday dinners where the whole family gathered. The house filled with voices and laughter, children running through the rooms, and the smell of Theodora's cooking drifting from the kitchen. Porter stood at the head of the table, looking around at the faces of his family, and felt his throat tighten with emotion. This was what mattered. This was what he and Theodora had built from grief and loneliness, from courage and hope. This was love in its truest form, messy and complicated and absolutely beautiful. "Before we eat, I want to say something," Porter announced, and the chatter died down as everyone turned to listen. 23 years ago, I was lost. I had just buried my wife. I was trying to raise 3 children alone, and I did not know how I was going to make it through each day. Then a woman knocked on my door, a woman I had never met, and she offered to help. I had no idea that letting her into my home would change everything, but it did." He looked at Theodora, sitting at the other end of the table with their youngest son on one side and their oldest grandson on the other. "Your mother, your grandmother, she did not just become my housekeeper that day. She became the heart of this family. She brought love back into this house. She gave my children a mother, and she gave me a reason to keep going. Every good thing we have, every person sitting at this table exists because she was brave enough to knock on that door and I was smart enough to let her in." Theodora's cheeks were flushed with emotion, and several of their children were wiping their eyes. Sarah stood and raised her glass. "To Mama Theodora," she said, using the name she had called her stepmother for more than 2 decades. "The woman who saved us all." "To Mama," echoed Thomas and Emma, and soon everyone was raising their glasses in a toast. After dinner, after the dishes were washed and the grandchildren were settled in for the night in various rooms throughout the house, Porter and Theodora escaped once more to their porch. The stars were out in full force, brilliant against the black New Mexico sky, and the air was cool and sweet. "That was quite a speech you made at dinner," Theodora said, settling into her rocking chair. "It was all true," Porter said. "Every word." "I know, but you are going to make me cry if you keep talking like that." She smiled to show she was teasing. Porter reached over and took her hand, running his thumb over her wedding ring and the anniversary ring he had given her years ago. "Do you remember what you said to me that first morning, when I opened the door and you were standing there shivering in the cold?" Theodora thought for a moment, then smiled. "I said I hoped you could help me because I certainly needed it. And I said I could not imagine how," Porter recalled. "I was so focused on my own problems, on my own grief and struggles, that I could not see what a gift you were. But you knew, did you not? You knew from the beginning that you could help us." "I did not know," Theodora said honestly. "I hoped. I saw 3 children who needed a mother and a man who needed a partner, and I hoped that I could be what you needed, but I had no idea if I could actually do it. I was terrified, Porter. Terrified that I would fail you, that I would not be enough, that I would lose my heart again and end up broken." "But you were not broken," Porter said. "You were bent, maybe, damaged, but not broken, and neither was I. We were 2 people who had survived terrible losses, and we found a way to heal together." "We did," Theodora agreed. "And I would do it all again, every hard moment, every struggle, every challenge, because it brought me here. To you, to this family, to this life." They rocked in silence for a while, holding hands and listening to the night sounds of the ranch. From inside the house came the murmur of voices and occasional laughter as their adult children put the younger ones to bed. This was peace, Porter thought. This was contentment. This was what happiness truly looked like. "I want you to promise me something," Porter said eventually. "What is that?" "If I go first, if something happens to me, I want you to promise that you will keep living. Really living, not just existing. Find joy, spend time with the children and grandchildren, maybe even let yourself love again if the right person comes along. Promise me you will not let grief consume you the way it almost consumed me." Theodora turned to look at him, her eyes serious. "I promise, if you will promise me the same thing. If I am the one who goes first, you must keep living too. You must be there for our children and enjoy your grandchildren and not close yourself off from the world." "I promise," Porter said solemnly. "Good. But let us not talk about such sad things tonight. Tonight, let us just be grateful for what we have, right here, right now." Theodora squeezed his hand and smiled at him, and in the starlight, Porter could still see the beautiful woman who had knocked on his door all those years ago. They grew old together on that ranch in Pinon, New Mexico. They watched their children marry and have children of their own. They helped raise grandchildren and eventually even met a few great-grandchildren. The house that had once echoed with emptiness and grief became a home full of memories and love, a place where family gathered for celebrations and comfort, a haven in the often harsh world of the frontier. Porter's hair turned white and his back bent from years of hard work, but his love for Theodora never wavered. Theodora's hands became gnarled with arthritis and her step slowed, but her smile was still the brightest thing Porter knew. They were not perfect people, and theirs was not a perfect love, but it was real and true and deep, forged in the fires of loss and tempered by the daily choice to love each other. When they had been married for 42 years, when Porter was 74 and Theodora was 69, they renewed their vows in the same small church where they had first married. All of their children and grandchildren attended, along with half the town of Pinon, which had grown over the years from a small settlement to a proper town. Standing before the same minister who had married them decades ago, though he too was now old and gray, Porter and Theodora held hands and repeated the promises they had first made so long ago. "I, Porter Preston, renew my vows to you, Theodora Preston," Porter said, his voice still strong despite his age. "I promise to love you and cherish you, to stand beside you and support you for all the days God grants us." "I, Theodora Preston, renew my vows to you, Porter Preston," Theodora replied, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "I promise to love you and honor you, to be your partner and your friend until my last breath." There was not a dry eye in the church as the old couple kissed, sealing their promises once more. At the celebration afterward, their oldest grandson proposed a toast. "To Grandma and Grandpa," he said, raising his glass, "who proved that love is not just for the young, that second chances are real, and that the best things in life are worth waiting for. May we all be lucky enough to find what you two found when Grandma knocked on that door so many years ago. Here, here, echoed through the hall, and Porter pulled Theodora close, this woman who had filled his empty house and his empty heart, who had given him more than he ever thought possible. They lived several more good years together, their love story becoming legend in Pinyon. They were the couple who had found each other in grief and built a life of joy. They were the example others pointed to when they doubted that happiness could come again after loss. They were proof that love could heal, that families could be built in many ways, and that sometimes the best things in life come from taking a chance on a stranger who knocks on your door. Porter Preston passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 79, with Theodora lying beside him, holding his hand. His last words were, "Thank you for filling my empty house with love." Theodora lived for 3 more years after Porter's death, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, honored and loved by everyone who knew her. She spent her final days in the house she had made a home, looking out at the ranch that had been her sanctuary, remembering the life she had built with the man she loved. When she died at 72, they buried her beside Porter in the cemetery outside Pinyon, and on her gravestone, their children had engraved, "She knocked once and filled his empty house with love that lasted a lifetime." The ranch passed to Thomas and his family, who maintained it for generations to come. The house that Porter had built with his first wife, that Theodora had transformed with her love, remained standing for over 100 years, a testament to the family that had been created there. And the story of the widowed cowboy and the woman who knocked on his door became part of the town's history, told and retold, a reminder that hope and love can be found even in the darkest times, and that sometimes the best endings are really new beginnings in disguise. Their great-great-grandchildren still live in New Mexico, still tell the story of Porter and Theodora, still point to them as examples of what true love looks like. Not the easy, simple love of fairy tales, but the complicated, hard-won love of real life. The love that perseveres through loss and grief. The love that builds families and homes and legacies. The love that begins with a simple knock on a door and ends only when death parts 2 people who chose each other every single day for the rest of their lives. And so the story ends where it began, with an empty house that was filled, a widowed cowboy who found love again, and 3 children who gained a mother. But it is more than that. It is the story of Theodora Kane, who had the courage to knock on a stranger's door when she had nothing left. It is the story of Porter Preston, who had the wisdom to open that door and let love back into his life. It is the story of a family built not just by blood but by choice, by love, by the daily decision to show up and care for each other no matter what. In the end, that is what love is. Not a lightning bolt or a grand gesture, but a knock on a door, an opening, an invitation, a choice to let someone in, to risk your heart again, to believe that happiness is possible even after loss. Porter and Theodora made that choice, and it changed everything. For them, for their children, for the generations that came after. And perhaps that is the real lesson of their story. That it is never too late for a new beginning, that love can bloom even in the most unlikely circumstances, that the bravest thing we can do is open our hearts to the possibility of joy after sorrow. That sometimes all it takes is one knock, one open door, one person willing to fill an empty house with love.